Hi, my name is Lily Reisinger, and I will be talking about the short and long reflexes of the enteric nervous system. So first, I want to talk about the major players in the enteric nervous system. So we often refer to the enteric nervous system as the brain in your gut. The gut's brain is located in the sheaths of tissue lining the esophagus, stomach, small intestine, and the colon, also known as the gastrointestinal or GI tract. There are four key components to this that I would like to point out here in a cross section of the small intestine. First, we have the mesentery, which attaches the bowel to the body wall and contains major arteries, veins, and lymphatics, and also external nerves. Then we have the submucosal plexus. This layer contains sensory cells that communicate with the myenteric plexus and motor fibers that stimulate the secretion of fluids in the lumen. And then the mesenteric plexus, as mentioned above, is layers that contains neurons responsible for regulating the enzyme output of adjacent organs. So that could be anything from the kidney to the liver. And then the lumen has no nerves actually entering this area. It's this internal part of the small intestine where digestion occurs. The brains in our head, so our brain and gut, have to monitor conditions in the lumen across the lining of the bowel, and pretty much everything that goes on in the lumen is sensed by either the enteric nervous system or your central nervous system. So a little bit more about the enteric nervous system. It was first recognized really about a century ago when scientists noted that isolated sections of intestine removed from the body created a reflex wave of peristaltic contraction when pressure in the lumen was increased. So what they observed really was the ability of the enteric nervous system to carry out a reflex independent of control by the central nervous system. So the enteric nervous system can function or can create reflexes without the help of the central nervous system. And the enteric nervous system is in charge of three main functions, which is motility in the digestive system, secretion in the digestive system, and growth of the digestive system. So anatomically and functionally, the enteric nervous system shares many features with the central nervous system. First is intrinsic neurons. Intrinsic neurons of the two nerve plexuses in the digestive tract are those neurons that lie completely within the wall of the gut, just as interneurons are completely contained within the central nervous system. Autonomic neurons that bring signals from the central nervous system to the digestive system are called extrinsic neurons. Neurotransmitters and neuromodulators are also present in the enteric nervous system. So the enteric nervous system releases more than 30 neurotransmitters and neuromodulators, which are pretty much identical to what or those molecules found in the brain. These neurotransmitters are usually called non-adrenergic or non-cholinergic to distinguish them from the traditional autonomic neurotransmitters, norepinephrine and acetylcholine that are found in the brain. Some examples that are pretty common are serotonin, vasoactive intestinal peptide, and nitric oxide. Glial support cells are important in the ENS. The glial cells of neurons within the ENS are similar to the astroganglia of the brain than to the Schwann cells of the peripheral nervous system. A diffusion barrier is also present, so the capillaries that surround ganglia in the ENS are not very permeable and create a diffusion barrier that is really similar to the blood-brain barrier of cerebral blood vessels. And then an integrating center. So as I talked about earlier, reflexes that originate in the GI tract can be integrated and act on without neural signals ever leaving the enteric nervous system. For this reason, the neuron network of the ENS is its own integrating center, much like the brain and the spinal cord. However, this kind of creates some difficulties. As noted below, studying the enteric nervous system function is challenging because these enteric reflexes have no discrete command center. So I'm now going to move into talking about short reflexes. So the enteric nerve plexus in the gut wall acts as the little brain, allowing local reflexes to begin, be integrated, and end completely in the GI tract. So as I talked about in the first slide, that is the little brain. Reflexes that originate within the enteric nervous system and are integrated there without any outside input are called short reflexes. The submucosal plexus contains sensory neurons that receive signals from the lumen of the gut. The enteric nervous system network integrates this sensory information and then will initiate its own response. The myenteric plexus neurons in the muscularis externa influence motility then in the gut. Okay, now for long reflexes. Although the enteric nervous system can work in isolation, it also sends sensory information to the central nervous system and then receives input from the central nervous system through autonomic neurons. In the digestive system, some classic reflexes originate with sensory receptors in the GI tract, but others do also originate outside of the digestive system. No matter where they originate, though, digestive reflexes integrated in the central nervous system are called long reflexes. So even if they do begin in the digestive system, if they are integrated through the CNS, they are called a long reflex. So these reflexes can include feed-forward reflexes as well as emotional reflexes. And these long reflexes are called cephalic reflexes because they originate in the brain. Feed-forward reflexes begin with stimuli such as sight, smell, sound, or the thought of food, and they prepare the digestive system for food that the brain is anticipating. So for example, if you're hungry and you smell a chicken roasting in the oven, your mouth will start to water and your stomach will start to growl because you are anticipating future digestion of that food. In long reflexes, the smooth muscle and glands of the GI tract are under autonomic control. So in general, we say that the parasympathetic division is excitatory and will enhance GI function, leading us to the nickname rest and digest. Most parasympathetic neurons to the GI tract are found in the vagus nerve, and sympathetic neurons usually then will inhibit GI function. Emotional reflexes and their influence on the GI tract illustrate another link between the brain and the digestive system. So GI responses to emotion can range widely. So it can be traveler's constipation, to butterflies in your stomach, to psychologically induced vomiting and diarrhea. This figure shows the integration of both long and short reflexes in the digestive system. So on the left here, you see local stimuli. So these are going to be short reflexes, such as distension or presence of food in the stomach, osmolarity, and acid. All of those are local stimuli, and they're going to be short reflexes because they originate in the enteric nervous system and then are carried out entirely within the wall of the gut. Then at the top here, you see that feed-forward reflex as mentioned previously. So that is a long reflex. It's integrated within the central nervous system. Some of these originate outside the GI tract, like this, the feed-forward reflex of seeing or smelling food. However, you see here with the local stimuli that there is some long reflex at play because although it originates in the enteric nervous system, it is going to be integrated through the central nervous system. So the sensory receptors and neurons are then going to trigger the cephalic brain. So any local stimuli that goes via that pathway is going to be a long reflex. And then finally, this last slide just shows an example of short and long reflexes in the cephalic and gastric phases of digestion. So again, this stimulus coming from outside the digestive system, going through the medulla oblongata, and then ultimately causing secretion and motility. Going back here, you can see that those things in green are the tissue response. So this sight and smell of food, as well as presence of food in the stomach, is going to cause secretion of digestive enzymes and motility in the gut, pushing that food through the digestive system.